We have breaking news tonight. A major bust at a local truck stop has triggered a massive multi-agency operation near the U.S.-Mexico border.
This is a fictional dramatization for storytelling only. Tonight, the briefing hit like a hammer. 9,600 arrests tied to a single trafficking architecture, and it started with one traffic stop at a truck plaza. In the fictional state of Ravenport, highways cut through scrub desert like open veins, and the border sits close enough to taste in the air. The numbers came out cold and clinical, like they always do. 2:17 a.m., West Texas. One truck stop outside the city of Del Rio Vista. Investigators would later describe an alleged criminal operation worth $2.8 billion, hidden in plain sight behind diesel pumps, motel keycards, and way stations that always seemed to be out of order. The seizure list read like a national emergency. Millions of pills, tons of powder, stacks of cash. But the most disturbing number wasn't the drugs. It was the suspected compromise count. Evidence suggested 112 public employees had been touched. Some bought, some threatened, some simply turned. And the deeper the task force dug, the more it looked less like corruption and more like a command system. Listen closely, because what they were about to uncover made one thing clear. That truck stop wasn't just a drop point. It was a switch. 4:32 a.m., Del Rio Vista, Ravenport. A sky the color of old steel. Low fog rolling across the frontage road. Neon from the truck stop sign buzzing like an insect in your ear. If you were sleeping inside one of those parked rigs, you would have heard nothing at first. No sirens, no shouting. Just the soft, synchronized thud of boots on gravel, like rain starting. By 4:29, teams were already in position. FBI, DEA, Homeland Security Investigations. Local SWAT folded in under federal coordination, because this wasn't just narcotics. It was alleged trafficking, smuggling, and pipeline violence. The kind that only becomes news when a body is found in a ditch. 3 strike teams hit at once. One took the diner. One took the motel office. One took the mechanic bay. Because analysts believed the bay wasn't fixing engines. It was fixing loads. The roll-up door blew upward under a ram. Flashbang, white light. Then the hard, sharp sound of rifles coming up. Not fired yet. Not unless they had to. Inside, men in grease-stained coveralls froze like mannequins. A wrench clattered to concrete. Someone reached for a phone, then stopped when a laser dot landed on his chest. In the motel office, a clerk was pulled away from a safe he'd already opened, like he'd been waiting for someone to arrive. Just not these people. And taped beneath an old desktop monitor, agents found the first piece of the puzzle. A laminated schedule. Not a work schedule. A convoy schedule. License plates in code. Driver initials. Fuel receipts. A hand-drawn map of Texas with circles around tiny towns no tourist ever visits unless their car breaks down there. At 4:41, a canine hit on a refrigerated trailer parked behind the diner. The driver insisted it was produce. The seals told a different story. They cut the lock, opened the doors, and the smell that rolled out wasn't fruit. It was chemical, metallic, sweet in the way poison can be sweet. Cases stacked tight, shrink-wrapped, stamped with fake vitamin labels. Counterfeit pills, pressed in shapes meant to look safe. Some marked like painkillers. Some like anxiety meds. The kind that ends up in a teenager's pocket because somebody said it was fine. But the real violence wasn't in the drugs. It was in the timing. Because at 4:44, while the truck stop teams were still clearing rooms, other teams hit targets across the city. A massage spa that never had customers in daylight. A bar with no license and a back room that always stayed locked. A warehouse behind a family logistics company where the trucks only moved at night. Then, 2 blocks off the frontage road, the first shots. A suspect ran with a duffel bag and decided he'd rather gamble with bullets than gamble with prison. A short burst. Glass shattered. A body hit the pavement and didn't move. The street stayed quiet anyway. Because some neighborhoods learn something early. When violence becomes routine, silence becomes a survival skill. By 5:18, the first raid wave ended the way raid waves usually end. Suspects cuffed, property tagged, evidence photographed. And then came the twist. Behind a false wall in the mechanic bay, mismatched drywall, cheap paint, agents found a sealed steel locker bolted to studs. Inside, encrypted drives, burner phones still warm, and a paper ledger wrapped in plastic like it was meant to survive a flood. On the first page, in black ink, a name that didn't belong in a truck stop. A name connected, at least in the investigators' early notes, to the highest office in the state. Governor Calder Rourke. Not signed by, not paid to, just written there like a destination, like an end point. And in that moment, the investigation changed shape. Because this wasn't a mayor taking bribes. This wasn't an officer looking the other way. If the evidence held, this was command-level collusion. Not negligence, not corruption. Engineered control. 6:03 p.m. FBI Field Office, Del Rio Vista. Cyber Forensics Lab. Fluorescent lights, tired faces, the soft hum of servers that never sleep. A digital examiner slid the drives into a write blocker, like they were handling a bomb. Because in a way, they were. Layered encryption, custom obfuscation. The kind of thing you don't see from street crews. The kind of thing you see from someone who expects to be hunted. When the first container cracked, it wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a map. A living network diagram that pulsed as it loaded, like a heart on a monitor. Across the top, Project Dust Meridian. It looked like cartel infrastructure, optimized like a corporate supply chain. Shell companies, ghost corporations, sham charities with patriotic names, restaurants that moved cash, a logistics firm that moved everything else, offshore accounts that didn't receive money so much as inhale it, then breathe it back into the U.S. through loans, grants, and contracts. Invoices for produce transport, construction aggregates, renewable equipment, disaster relief, paper masks over real movement. Then analysts found an authorization layer. Not a name, a key. A cryptographic signature used to approve route changes, override delays, and flag certain shipments as protected. And according to the recovered materials, that key appeared linked to a device registered under a state procurement account. That's when the room went quiet. Because if you can move a shipment through a state like you own the roads, then you don't have a smuggling ring. You have a shadow government. 3:51 a.m. Joint Operations Command Center, Ravenport DPS Annex. Before dawn, the world was still black. But inside it was nothing but light. Screens, satellite imagery, and a giant digital map that made the state look like a wounded animal. Red markers pulsed in clusters. Dozens, then hundreds. Warehouses, bars, clinics, church outreach centers, truck yards, rural ranch properties with too many cameras and too little livestock. The unified mission profile came together fast. Over 1,000 federal agents, dozens of SWAT teams, helicopters staged across multiple airfields, armored vehicles that looked like they belonged overseas, a prosecutor's team flipping through warrants signed overnight. At 4:08, the operation launched. And it didn't launch like a raid. It launched like a war plan. A desert warehouse, an alleged super lab, industrial presses, dye packs, pill molds stacked like dinner plates, a mansion in the hills, security systems, rifles on racks, encrypted radios, a panic room doubling as a cash vault, a border scrub stash site, tight scheduling, convoy protection, rapid dispersal into domestic highways. A convoy of vans stopped at a red light, doors yanked open, hands zip-tied, concealed panels ripped back. Across hours, seizures stacked up. More pills, more powder, more cash. Server racks unplugged and lifted like sacred objects. And then, at 9:26 a.m., the moment that changed everything. A black SUV rolled into the secured perimeter of the Ravenport Capitol Annex. Not a suspect vehicle, a state vehicle. 2 agents approached. The door opened. A man stepped out in a suit. In this fictional story, authorities place Governor Calder Rourke under arrest on federal charges tied to racketeering and conspiracy. By noon, the task force delivered a line that echoed through every agency involved. The underworld took more damage in 6 hours than in the last 6 years. But inside evidence intake, the mood wasn't triumph. It was grim. Because the next phase wasn't about doors. It was about mirrors. Investigators compared patrol logs to convoy timestamps, maintenance closures at way stations to shipment windows, anonymous tips that sent units in the wrong direction, raid schedules that leaked like broken pipes. The pattern suggested a second payroll system, a parallel government, a shadow enforcement layer. One exhausted deputy, recorded on a body mic in later filings, whispered, "I've been chasing ghosts, and my own people have been feeding them." That line landed hard because it wasn't poetry. It was fatigue. Arrests spread. Officers, coordinators, courthouse staff, procurement officials. And in the streets, the public reaction shifted from shock to betrayal. Because people didn't just want traffickers in cuffs. They wanted their institutions back. By nightfall, a federal spokesperson delivered a sentence that sounded like policy, but felt like grief. The system will be rebuilt from the ground up. Then the map zoomed out. Because Dust Meridian wasn't built for one state. It was built like a spine. Routes connected outward through trucking contractors and agricultural supply corridors. Port city transfers, containers labeled building materials, refrigeration units, even green energy components. And investigators believed the network used chaos as camouflage. Smuggling, trafficking, distraction, people as cover. The final file wasn't a ledger. It was strategy. Ravenport continuity. Language that sounded like politics and sounded like occupation. A plan to embed protection into contracts, grants, staffing pipelines, procurement, and security partnerships that could outlive elections. The chilling realization wasn't that the system had been infiltrated. It was that the system may have been redesigned, quietly, patiently, for a cartel future. And here's the warning at the heart of this fictional thriller. Power does not always need open violence. Sometimes power only needs silence and ambition. In Ravenport, the neighborhoods hit hardest weren't the rich ones behind gates. They were the ones where parents worked 2 jobs and still feared the next knock on the door. Where counterfeit pills moved faster than truth. Where meth didn't just ruin a body, it hollowed out a street. And the cruelest part? The cartel didn't need to conquer those communities. It only needed to sell to them. To keep selling, it needed protection. Not just from rivals, from the very institutions designed to stop it. This has been a fictional dramatization inspired by real-world public warnings about synthetic opioids and counterfeit pills. Not real news. Not a real case. Not an allegation about any real person. End story.